Now the sixth topic is mystery of Haku. So here is the scene where Chihiro embraces Haku, who comes back covered with blood. In terms of how he functions in the structure of the story, he's designed as a bad boy figure as seen from a girl. Ordered by authoritative adults, a pure boy does bad things in the outside world and comes back covered with blood. But such a bad boy who regular people are scared of is kind to this one girl, just like a hero in the girls' comic books. He's a boyfriend figure in the story. I've read a girls' comic book from Showa period called Hot Road, but that's how it looks like. Or it's like banana fish. There's a scene where Haku tells Chihiro, "I've always been watching you." When Chihiro asks, "How do you know my name?" he answers, "I have known you since you were little." At the scene where Haku passes on the rice bowl to Chihiro, Haku can't remember his name. After all, his name has been taken away. That's why he says, "I can't even remember my own name, but it's strange, I remember you." Again, most people just follow the spoken lines, and if we take the line as it is, Haku is the guardian god of a river called Kohaku River, who rescues Chihiro when she's about to drown there. So he knows her because of that incident. At least that's what the script says. He says, "I knew you since you were a child." However, the line that says, "I can't even remember my own name, but it's strange I remembered you," doesn't make much sense. For example, when Chihiro worries about Haku when he's injured, Kamaji says, "It's love." He says, "This is love, love." But this too is too unlikely for any of Miyazaki's previous anime. Even if the protagonists in his movies like each other, they usually don't express their feelings in such a straightforward way. So why is it different here? There is also something called the mysterious lyrics. When Miyazaki made the movie, he sent some lyrics to Joe Hisaishi, the music producer, to tell him the image of the movie. I just quoted parts of it. It's a poem titled "At the River That Day." I go from the backyard where the sun shines, through the forgotten door and down the path where the hedges cast shadows on. The young child running from the other side is me, soaking wet and crying. I follow the footsteps of the sandbox father to the now buried river. The aquatic plants sway between the garbage. I met you in that small river. My shoes flow away slowly and get drawn into a small swirl and disappear. The dust that covered my heart and the fog that hid my eyes go away. The hand touches the air and the feel take the bounce of the ground. I live for someone and someone who lived for me. I went to the river that day. I went to your river. Well, it didn't become an official song, but these mysterious lyrics such as "I return soaking wet," "My shoes are flowing away slowly," "Someone who lived for me" seem to be hinting something. After all, he did not adopt this song in the main story, but it helps us think about the strange scene where Chihiro remembers the past. It's toward the end of the story where she flies with Haku. It's a scene after they go to see Zeniba, ask her to forgive Haku, and now she flies in the sky on a white dragon, the incarnation of Haku. It is the biggest climax of the movie. There Chihiro suddenly remembers. Well, like this, a hand is stretching out into the water. But the thing is, the size of the splash here is too big for just a hand put in the water. We can also think that it's because Chihiro drops, but no. If it's after she drops, then there shouldn't be such a big splash of water before the hand goes in. It looks like a hand stretches out toward the splash, caused by something bigger. To make this clear, let's look at the storyboard in the scene. You see the same cuts in the storyboard, but what I paid attention to is the instruction that says a child's hand stretches out quickly. It says a child's hand, and that's because they needed to distinguish it with Chihiro's hand. It's not her hand, it's somebody else's. But they didn't want to publicize whose hand it was. This scene is trying to depict how a hand stretches out for something large that has fallen into the water. But why a child hand, not Chihiro's hand? In the next scene, Chihiro remembers it. Now, please take a look at her shoulders. The color of the face and the shoulders is the same. This tells us that she's naked. The reason why Chihiro is naked in this scene is that when she's small, she falls into that river naked. Well, kids are often dressed only in underwears where they play in rivers. Just like that, Chihiro is half naked when she falls into that river. Well, then, the child who's reaching the hand out is wearing a t-shirt. Isn't that weird? If that hand was Chihiro's hand, the situations would contradict, because she's at least not wearing anything on her upper body. The question is then, what is being depicted? Well, I talked about that last time. Maybe I should talk about the original story. In an interview, Miyazaki always said that one day he had to make his version of the Night of the Milky Way train. And he said that Spirited Away became it. The theme was the fact that when a person is alive, it is because someone has made them alive. Miyazaki said that he wanted to send that message clearly in the movie, and he actually did. He repeated that same message in the movie brochure, that someone has always lived for you and made you live. But when you just follow the story of Spirited Away, we can't tell why Miyazaki emphasized it so many times. It's a theme that comes out in The Night of the Milky Way, which Miyazaki values so much. He said the theme is contained in the scene of Unabara Electric Railway. However, while there are plenty of research books on Spirited Away, I can hardly find anyone who discusses the thematic part in depth. That's because everyone is trying to understand Spirited Away from the story and above all, lines. But Miyazaki is a creator who speaks through images. For example, these two pictures look almost identical. The difference is that in the upper picture, the house is built on water, while in the lower one, on a hill. The upper picture is a scene of Unabara Electric Railway from Spirited Away. The lower one is a scene from the anime of The Night of the Milky Way train, where everyone is about to go to the world of death. They're drawn in almost the same composition. This is also one of the respects Miyazaki paid towards The Night of the Milky Way train. He intentionally drew a scene in the same composition. In The Night of the Milky Way train, the main character Giovanni is spacing out on the hill on a summer festival night called Centaur Festival. And before he knew, he was on a train bound for the Milky Way. Then he finds his best friend Campanella standing in front of him, soaking wet from head to toe. Right, as you can see, when Campanella wipes his shoulder with a handkerchief, many water drops fall. You may wonder why he's wet. Giovanni joyfully says, "We're always together, Campanella, we're always together." But Campanella doesn't say anything back to Giovanni, instead he just smiles sadly. As the story continues, 3 people come on board. Most characters you see in this story are cats, so it's exciting to finally see more humans. A brother, a sister, and a private teacher come out. It's surprising because from the beginning, you see that the brother is missing a shoe. The sister who comes out with the brother gently wipes off the water drops off his head. They turned out to be the passengers of the Titanic. The ship they were on hit an iceberg, which caused a serious accident and everyone was submerged in the water. After all, this is the only scene with humans in it. It has this scary atmosphere. Then the teacher talks about the accident in a very gentle voice but without being emotional. She says, I was thinking while pulling the hands of my students and overtaking other children who are waiting for the life-saving boats. Since the boats were only on the opposite side and in the back, she overtook other people waiting in line, pushed her way through the other small children on board in order to save her students. She went forward and forward in order to survive. But she thought, will this really be the happiness of these kids? Or is it my duty to take the sin and save them? As I reached the boat thinking like that, I saw a mother crying after finally loading her children on a boat and numerous other parents in the same circumstance. Finally, I couldn't care about what I had in mind anymore, so I hugged the two kids tightly on the ship that was sinking. The teacher talks about the incident so slowly and gently. While she talks, the sister wipes the brother's wet hair, then finds a shoe from somewhere, then put it on his foot. This scene contains the true greatness of Kenji Miyazawa, the author who also wrote The Nighthawk Star. Here he depicts people who attempt to make others happy through self-sacrifice. That was the theme that Miyazaki had always wanted to depict or had to depict. And that leads to At the River That Day, where the shoes flow away slowly and get drawn into a small swirl and disappear. Someone who has lived for me. He really tried to make an anime with this theme, someone who has lived for me. The teacher of the Night of the Milky Way train says, but it's going to be alright once we get to the Southern Cross. All the pain will be gone. And the three people get off at the station by the Southern Cross. There are giant cross stands far beyond the horizon, and infinitely many worshippers walk towards the cross in line. The private teacher, the sister, and a younger brother are also dressed like the worshippers and walk along the cats. After passing the coal sack station, Campanella tells Giovanni, I can't go with you anymore. And as soon as he says that, he goes behind the train and disappears. In fact, Campanella drowned after saving his classmate named Zanelli, who fell into the river. That's why the bodies of Campanella and the three other passengers were wet. Campanella sacrificed his life to help a friend. Well then, back to Spirited Away. The child's hand is extending to where someone fell. According to the storyboard, it's a child's hand. But it's not Chihiro, because Chihiro fell into the river naked. A child's hand stretched out to save her. In other words, there should be some child wearing a t-shirt who reached out to help Chihiro. And who's that? The main part of discussion in this part is to answer the question of who that is. When Chihiro says, how do you know my name? Haku says, I've known you since you were little. The reason why Haku knows Chihiro from a young age despite the fact that he can't even remember his own name is that he's Chihiro's dead brother. Chihiro did not float her shoes in the river. She fell in the river. Her brother pulled her out to help her, but instead, he was swept out by the river and did not return. The scene shows how her brother became a god by sacrificing his life for someone else. Chihiro doesn't remember this. He says, I don't remember this, but I heard it from my mother. Even though she says she floated the shoes, she doesn't remember it at all. So, her mother didn't tell Chihiro that she had an older brother or he died because of her. She only told Chihiro that she almost drowned in a river when she was little. That's why she doesn't remember the incident, but Haku does. The reason why Haku says, it's strange that I remember you, and Kamaji affirms, it's the power of love, it's because it's fraternal love. Haku doesn't want to hurt Chihiro's feeling, so even if he remembers what happened, he won't say it, nor will Kamaji. Or maybe Haku himself doesn't remember the incident. In the movie, they say Kohaku River was filled up with earth and disappeared later. The expression implies implies death, because this idea of landfill is a metaphor for burial, funeral, or a corpse. But he still is not a perfect god because Chihiro can see him. The real gods are only visible near Abraya at night after the lights are turned on. In the end, he does turn into a perfect god.